maybe it would be different. Maybe if a different defensive coordinator would be and the defense wouldn't look so crappy. I thought for a second I was on radio and I didn't want to swear. It's fucked. Let's listen to what Rex Ryan has to say.
Okay, because we're all looking. How come this marriage, Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, doesn't seem to be clicking? Well, it is clicking. This team has averaged more points per possession than any offensive unit in the National Football League. Nobody knows that. It's the truth. Last week, they only had 6 possessions. So whose fault is that on? It's on their defense. Their defense is supposed to be number 1 in the league. If I was going to be the coordinator, I don't know what the hell it's doing now. That's who's letting this team down. It's their defense. It's not the offense. So to me, it's a crazy stat. This team is more points per possession than any offense in the league. So to me, I think it's fixable. And we just got to get that defense playing to what the expectations were.
Rex Ryan is fucking hilarious. Let's start off there.
We are going to start there. Go for it, Joey.
Okay, thank you. Rex Ryan's hilarious. I first want to start about the guy. He was spitting a little bit, like when he was talking about the Broncos are number 1 in points per possession. That's a fact. You can't take that away. That is literally a stat, and I think that's something people need to know. When you look at that first Raiders game, terrible for points per game, but really good on points per possession. They only had 6 series really on that, and they had opportunity to score in 4 of those. The area where it's like, Rex Ryan, you're out of your mind, is that he thinks that he could have the number 1 defense with this team. I don't think there's anybody that could have the number 1 defense with the roster as it's constructed. It's just not a very talented roster. There's been a lot of, is it completely Vance Joseph's fault? I don't think so. Is it a little bit Vance Joseph's fault? Definitely. That it falls somewhere in the middle. It's a mixture on that side of the football. I wonder, though, if Rex Ryan was the defensive coordinator right now, would the defense be better? And I lean yes. That's where I do think he has a little bit of a point. Rex Ryan is an innovator. I'm not sure what Vance Joseph has innovated. Rex Ryan is definitely an innovator. He led an era of football on that defensive side, a lot like Vic Fangio has in this era of defensive football. So I lean in Rex Ryan's kind of words there, but I also disagree completely in that this defense would be number 1. Yeah, that's just where I am.
Wait. You think the defense would be number 1 with Rex Ryan, or you don't agree completely?
I completely disagree. That would be ridiculous.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misheard you. I thought you said you completely agreed with that, and I'm like, whoa. Yeah, I agree. I think Vance Joseph is totally deserving of criticism. I think this defense is also really lacking talent. Like, it's not an either or. I keep having like an argument with people on Twitter where I don't think it's a binary. I'm not trying to protect Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph has been bad. He is a big problem with this defense. I also think, secondary is probably this team's biggest strength on defense, and secondary is a position group defined by its weakest link. And man, does that secondary have some serious weak links. And then if it's not the secondary, it's inside linebacker, where the Broncos have a couple of good players, but nothing extraordinary there, and both those players have their limitations. So, and then you talk about a defensive front that is just so disappointing so far this season. I don't know who'd be coaching it up. The Rex Ryan versus Vance Joseph debate is hilarious to me, though. It reminds me of in Superbad when McLovin first shows off his fake ID, and they're giving him a hard time for choosing the name McLovin, and he's like, well, it was either that or Muhammad, and they're like, why the fuck would it be that or Muhammad? That's how I feel here. Why the fuck would it be Vance Joseph or Rex Ryan, a guy who hasn't been in the NFL for several years and has just been corny on ESPN for like the last half decade? Why is that option B? Like, let's have the Vic Fangio convo. I feel like if Sean Payton truly got his way, it would have been Vic Fangio.
Okay, but we can have that conversation. But I want to talk a little bit about the talent on the roster, because I think I have a little bit of pushback there. Because when you're talking about good defenses, superstar defenses, Super Bowl winning defenses. A lot of the time you start thinking about player production and who's creating a lot of pressures. Last week we saw that the pass rush was just non-existent. Today or on Sunday, that changed pretty remarkably so. And I think that you can argue that the talent maybe isn't the issue. Now, injuries are piling up for the secondary. There's a lack of extreme depth there, but where do you see the largest and most talented stars being on one said defense? I think you're looking and reaching a little bit too far, hoping that you have like these major star powers. You have Justin Simmons, you have Patrick Surtain, you do have a Randy Gregory who is absolutely lights out. Nick Benito was stepping up, both linebackers, or all three of them rather. So I don't think that there's a lack of talent on this defense. I think there's a lack of continuity there. I think there is a direct point at where Vance Joseph isn't utilizing that defense to the best of its standards. There's Zach Allen missing. Like we need a wanted poster. I think Drew Sanders not getting any reps. The absence of Riley Moss, who could or could not have an impact depending on the injuries that we're seeing in the cornerback room. So let's just talk a little bit. And I just want to push back, and you guys can yell at me because I know the chat's going crazy. I'll get to you guys in a second. I do not think it's a lack of talent on the defense, because before we started this season, hopes were way up and injuries haven't impacted him that far. So is it the line? Is it a sense of like against different opponents they're struggling? Because I do not believe it's a talent issue.
I do think it's a talent issue because, okay, so you point out Patrick Surtain, who I do think is the best cornerback in the league, and I do think so far has had an insane season. Like, it is looking awesome out there. But when you have such glaring incompetencies in the secondary, like Surtain can only do so much. He can only cover one guy on every single play. And if the other 3-4 players out on a route aren't being covered, the offense will just go to one of them. And I think that's kind of the problem with this Broncos defense right now. I think hopes were high. Joey and I hyped up a guy like Randy Gregory because of what he was early last season before the injury. And he has not bounced back to pre-injury form. Like, look at the first, I forget when he got injured last year, week 5, week 6, the first 4-5 weeks of the season when he was healthy, his numbers are of a top 5, top 10 pass rusher in the league. Yeah. He has not been close to that. D-Bronx put it in the chat. He's getting beat by Andrew Wiley and Jermaine Illuminor. Yeah, like that's a lack of talent. Zach Allen, you talked about him being on a missing poster. That's a lack of talent. Like Vance Joseph drafted Zach Allen or he was part of the staff or the regime, whatever, that drafted Zach Allen and has groomed him and then targeted that guy to replace Draymond Jones. I don't think it's like Vance Joseph doesn't know how to use Zach Allen. I think it's a lack of talent. And it's Vance Joseph too. Don't get me wrong. He's been bad. He's not maximizing this team. But post Bradley Chubb trade, the Denver Broncos were 23rd in defensive EPA last year. It's like the second half of the season. It's a really big sample size. 23rd in defensive EPA. Now they're like 30th, 31st, I think. If we want to blame Vance Joseph for the drop from 23 to 31, that's fair. I think the lack of talent is the reason they've dropped from top 5 to 23rd.
Let me try to meet you guys in the middle here. What I think we're kind of seeing, guys, is I'm not sure this defensive roster was ever extremely talented. You always had your kind of stars on it. What I think we're kind of seeing is Broncos country has been extremely fortunate to have like top 5 defensive minds on their team for a very long time here, stretching all the way back to Vance Joseph. And then before that, that was Wade Phillips. Like we're talking Evero Fangio, Vance Joseph, right? But before that, Wade Phillips. 3 of our 4 last defensive guys have just been absolute crazy people. We're talking about top 5 defensive guys, I think. And now we're kind of meeting into a point where it's below average, and you're seeing these holes that have always been kind of on the roster a little bit. Even this year there has been a regression, but a lot of these holes have been on the roster and they're showing because you don't have a guy out there to patch up those holes and hide it. Vic Fangio and Evero were amazing. Everybody's trying to run those defenses they mastered. Van Joseph right now is hired to try to run their defense, despite the fact that he's never done it before. That's how great these two last guys were for the Broncos. So I think what's happening is you're seeing a defensive coordinator just be outclassed by the prior ones, and it's shocking fans. I really think that's what's going on right now. I mean, we've been on this podcast, all three of us have been on this podcast being like, hey guys, a defensive regression is probably going to happen purely off of talent regression, just a little bit. I don't think we expected it to be this stark of a drop off because we wanted Vance Joseph to be up there at least in that top 12, top 10 range. And I'm not sure he's in that. I think he's more top 18, top 19, maybe 20, that type of area. And he's just not able to hide those holes that the Broncos defense currently has.
I like Paul's comment here. I'm going to read it over from YouTube. How many coaches do you go through to prove it is a talent issue? Respect your view, Bree. Thanks, Paul, for asking so respectfully. So I'll answer it. I don't know. I don't know what's to see here. Like Joey said, we've been on here quite a bit talking about this was what was going to happen. And I kind of wanted to start the show on that note because the expectations coming in again, you're seeing that blow up. You're seeing people have those stark reactions here. I think the boys are both correct, though. It is an issue of not being able to pull it off when it matters the most. And that's being a direct inhibitor to the success of this team. It's not new. It's definitely not something that we weren't expecting. If you had been listening to Let's Talk Broncos, you would have heard this already. And if you're listening to the other folks, that's fine by you, but you may have had your expectations a little bit higher. Joey, I saw you had one more point.
Yeah, for sure. The main thing here, you see Rex Ryan on this thumbnail. I just want to ask you guys this, and it could be fast. Do you guys think Rex Ryan would be a better defensive coordinator than Vance Joseph right now? Do you think the Broncos would be in a better place? That's kind of my main question.
I was kind of hoping Zach would go first.
Man, no, I was trying to. I'm just stuck. Like, part of me wants to say no because Rex Ryan hasn't been in the NFL for so long, and going from the ESPN desk to a defensive coordinator, like, I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith that's going to go awesome. That said, it'd be really hard to be worse. Like, part of me feels like, well, they're already the 31st, 32nd defense in the league. So could Rex Ryan make them 30th or 29th? I mean, maybe. I think it could definitely be better. I would be stunned if he could make a market difference. I think like Bill Belichick, maybe Vic Fangio, maybe Ejiro Evero. I think those guys would even struggle. Again, post-Chubb trade, even with Ejiro Evero, this defense was ranked 23rd in the NFL. That is a great point, Zach, because as you're talking through that, the idea is how much appreciable difference can you see in changing out that coaching position specifically? If you change what you've already had, you're just replacing coordinators, and then the talent lack in itself or the lack of depth, whatever you want to bring to the table to say that this is why the defense is failing. I don't think a coordinator of that caliber is really moving the needle much. Although how much of Sean Payton needs to take a rap for that and not just being scapegoated into Vance Joseph, which also on Let's Talk Broncos, we talked about that happening. We have to take a worldview picture at this, Joey. So I'm glad you brought that up. How do you feel about it? Do you think Rex Ryan would be better?
I think Rex Ryan has a significantly higher ceiling. Is it definitely higher? I think it has just as good of a chance to be a disaster as well because of the reasons Zach said in that, hey, he's coming off an ESPN desk where a lot of people have been clowning him for some years for some of the stuff he said on there, right? But one thing you absolutely cannot take away from Rex Ryan is that he was an innovator. He's a guy that changed the defense. He really, really was. And he got 2 head coaching opportunities off that defense. It's family legacy for that guy. And his dad was amazing. His brother has had opportunities in the NFL. That is a family NFL team, and they've all been really good at defense at a point in time. I think it has a significantly high ceiling to maybe where you can hide some of those holes just because his defense is that good. But I think it also has a disastrous part to it. So I'm not exactly sure, but higher ceiling, lower floor. That's what I would say.